Hello, welcome to the Eclipse Evolution podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Rose Johnson. So grateful to be checking in with you all today on this full moon in Libra. And really, the full moon's theme tonight is all about relationships, whether it's our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our partner, like romantic partner, and about balance with that. And so, regardless if astrology is your thing or not, I wanted to kind of focus on these things that are relevant always and tonight. And with our conversation, I wanted to teach you all a kind of communication trick that I teach many of my clients and try to practice myself. So, when it comes down to really inviting balance into our relationship with others, communication is key, as I'm sure you've heard. And for me, I have had to learn that communication is different than just talking to someone. And so, really, when I think about communication, and what I kind of want to challenge you to also think about with communication is consciousness and how consciousness affects our communication. And what I mean by that is what kind of self awareness do we have? And how are we bringing that into our interactions with others? Because arguing is a type of communication, like fighting is a type of communication, not talking to someone is a type of communication. But when we can really consciously communicate and show up and invite that self-awareness into what we're doing, the conversations that we have with people can just be so much more fruitful and so much, sometimes, briefer. Sometimes I think we can get a little, at least when I say we, I mean myself. I can get a little caught up in like emotions, and sometimes I can just be flooded with emotions, and I can just keep talking and talking because I'm trying to feel better through talking. But whomever I'm talking with is like just getting all this chatter that doesn't necessarily help them. So that's kind of what I mean by like being self-aware and conscious and showing up with that consciousness and that thought in how we communicate with others. And so what I wanted to do was teach you what I call our cookie communication trick, or our Oreo communication trick. And this is not sponsored by Oreo. I just love Oreos, okay? Specifically the double stuff. I don't know. Double stuff or go home. That's just how I feel. But so when it comes down to Oreos, and why I use these as an example of kind of learning this communication trick, is if you take a look at an Oreo, we have cookie, frosting, cookie. And so why I also felt like this was relevant for our full moon in Libras, because take off one of the cookies and you have a full moon with the icing. I don't know. I'm basically just 5 years old at heart. But so when it comes down to how this cookie translates into communication with others, is if you want to think about how you show up in that conversation like this cookie, it can be really helpful. So the first piece of the chocolate, like the cookie part, is going to be what I would like to say, kind of setting the tone, allowing the ego, our defenses, kind of what I mean by that. Our defenses, we're going to just allow those to kind of calm, so that way we can enter the conversation from a place that is grounded and we're not triggered and upset, but rather we and our whomever we're speaking with, our partner, whomever, is able to also be approached in a way that shows them care and concern and compassion and thoughtfulness. So that's going to be that first layer of the cookie. We want to start off a conversation, like, for example, so let's say, I'll use an example with me and my partner. So let's say I'm feeling like a little upset or a little annoyed with maybe him not putting his dishes in the sink. This is what happens when you are in a domestic relationship. So he's left his dishes out. I'm over here feeling a little salty about it. But if I just kind of come right at him and say, like, why don't you put your dishes on the sink? How dare you disrespect me? Which sometimes I feel that way. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I feel that way, especially if I'm like hormonal, I will just want to come at him that way because I'm just feeling the dishes. But that's instantly just because I'm coming at him and fussing and maybe accusing him or blaming him or whatever. Instantly, his defenses are going to go up. And then he's maybe not going to want to talk to me as much, or maybe he's going to be like afraid of what my reaction might be. So he might withhold, and then we're not communicating as fluidly or as consciously as we could be. So instead, initiating that conversation. So if we have the first part of that cookie being, hey babe, I just want to let you know, I really appreciate all that you do for me around the house. And it just makes me feel so loved. And I love how we share this space together. And I love our home so much. So bam, I'm kind of letting him know the bigger picture and that I do appreciate all the wonderful things he does for me. He does so much. And it's not just focusing on the dishes themselves. I'm trying to kind of look at the relationship as a whole, or the situation as a whole, and giving him some credit. And so that's going to be the first part. And then the frosting is going to be the feedback. So even though that might be the sweetest part of the cookie, that sometimes isn't the sweetest part of the conversation. So the frosting is going to be, instead of like, why can't you put your dishes all right? It's going to be more along the lines of like, so along those lines, if you please could try to put your dishes in the sink more frequently, or as soon as you're done with them, like before you move on to the bedroom or wherever, like, can you please put them in the sink or in the dishwasher? Because I feel kind of like I'm cleaning up after you, or I feel like disrespected or whatever it is. When that doesn't happen. So that way he knows how it makes me feel when that situation isn't happening. And also I'm taking ownership of my feelings as well, like by kind of leading with that I statement of like, I feel blank when blank, instead of being like, you make me feel disrespected when you blah. That's just like gonna instantly be putting blame on him and making him responsible for my feelings, which he is not. So in this circumstance, I'm letting him know how I feel, and also like what might be attributing to my feelings, but in a way that is, again, looking at the bigger picture. Like, I'm not trying to destroy our relationship over some Tupperware, okay? So again, starting out like, hey, I love everything you do for me. You do so much. You're a fantastic partner. I love being a roomie with you. And then moving to, I feel kind of frustrated when you don't put your dishes in the sink, kind of giving him that feedback, letting him know maybe what needs to change. And then following up with the other part of that cookie afterwards. So a little bit of maybe repair, a little bit of like compassion wrapping around that feedback. So in that case, being like, hey, so after I deliver my request, letting him know, like, I appreciate how much you listen to me. Like, thank you for talking to me about this. I know you're not trying to do it on purpose. I just need to let you know how I feel. I appreciate all that you do. And this means a lot to me that you're going to try, or whatever the case may be. And so kind of ending, like bookending that conversation, which kind of having a container around a conversation, especially when that might be kind of challenging, is also important. So that way it's not something that's going to be like dragged out forever and creating hostility. Is something that we're going to talk about it. And then we're going to let the action take place from now on. So, and of course we can always revisit, and people forget, or sometimes it takes a little while to adjust to new things. And that's okay. That's where we have to let people be human. And I always say too, like, sometimes especially the early stages of working through whatever that cookie conversation is about, how we can kind of give grace to people as they're adjusting to our requests, is allowing a sense of humor in the process. So instead of like, let's say we talk about it 2 days later, we have a Tupperware on the coffee table or whatever, instead of just being like, dang it, babe, we just talked about this, how dare. Again, that's going to defeat all the work that we just did. So instead, inviting a sense of humor into it and being like, oh, wow, I wonder like what this Tupperware is going to do out here. Or just, I can't come up with an example off the top of my head, but like, I think just inviting in, again, like a sense of humor where it's like, oh my gosh, this Tupperware just grew legs and came out and sat on this table. Like, just finding a way to be silly with it. Just, it takes some of the emotion out of it. It allows there to be levity. It allows us to not, again, ruin our relationship over some Tupperware or dishes or whatever it is. And you can use that kind of technique with anyone, whether it's like another person at your job or your child, or even like that. I think that can be really, again, a helpful way to invite gentleness and compassion and observe our humanity in how we show up in those conversations. And so allow that person to be cared for, but then also while saying what we need to say. So I suggest, as you, whether you feel and engage with the energy of this full moon in Libra, or just, again, if that's not your thing, if you're just trying to find a better way to communicate with other people, definitely, I highly recommend the cookie communication method. So that is one of my tricks that I teach folks, and I hope you find it helpful. I certainly have. Again, it can take a little bit of time to get into the groove, to really find your own flair and style of communicating, so maybe it doesn't feel so like step 1, 2, 3 or formulaic. But I guarantee, just thinking about how you're communicating, how you're delivering that information, the order, the sequence, the tone, like how you order words, can be really helpful. And one thing I will leave you with as well that can also be helpful in providing someone with feedback is to, again, we don't want to shame anyone. Inviting in the phrase, hey, I've noticed XYZ. When we start off something like that we want to bring to someone's attention, it's a very gentle way that we're letting them know maybe something that we're concerned about, but also knowing that it's coming from that place of concern, not like, you haven't showered in 5 days, like, you stink. Like, it's not that. It's more so like, hey, I've noticed you haven't taken a shower in a little while. Like, do we need more soap? Like, are you okay? Like, whatever it is. Approaching it with that curiosity. So observation, it's kind of like observations part 1, like, hey, I noticed that this is happening, shows that person that you are in tune with them, that you care about them, that you see them, you're noticing that things are different. And then just asking them, are they okay? Like, what's going on? Like, has something changed? Inviting in that curiosity is part 2. Again, allows them to come to you rather than you just kind of being like, hey, what is this? Explain yourself to me. That can be like, whoa, a lot. But when you approach someone with, again, that observation, and then just trying to get curious about what's going on, just trying to understand because you care and you want to know how to help, that can be a way to actually really get people who are maybe more withdrawn, or who are maybe going through something tough, or maybe they're feeling ashamed or embarrassed. It allows them to come to you, and it allows there to be that balance in the conversation. So again, a very Libra kind of theme. So I hope that you can take that with you and apply it to your relationships, apply it to your interactions, and just see maybe how things are different, how people show up differently, and maybe even allowing things to be a little easier for everyone involved. And that's kind of the beauty of inviting consciousness and awareness into these communications, these interactions, is we allow ourselves to be our best self and allow that best self to come out of them as well. And when we're feeling our best, like, what can go wrong? So I hope you enjoyed those tips. And if you have any other questions about communication or relationships, I love that stuff. So please let me know. I'm happy to be a resource. But thank you so much for tuning in. As always, just thank you for your time. And speaking of my partner, he reminded me to remind you that your support is very much appreciated when it comes down to following and subscribing and sharing, whatever you feel inclined to do. This is my 5th episode, and I keep forgetting to mention that part. But if you feel like you need to spread this message, or would like to just stay up to date with my other messages and episodes, please feel free. I really appreciate the support and the engagement, and just I'm just so happy with this community that we're creating together. So thank you. It's been a pleasure as always, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.